Hey book friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my May wrap up. I read, oh gosh, only 6 books, but they were 4 and 5-star books, and some of them were quite chunky. I actually did do the tandem read for Throne of Glass, which is Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I have some thoughts and opinions to share with you, so let's just do that. Let's hop into all my thoughts of the books I read in May. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome or welcome back to the channel, all of the things. So you guys, I have, like I said, 6 books to talk about. What's great is I loved them. 4 and 5-star books, and they're from so many different genres. Like I have a historical fiction that I loved. I have a romantic suspense. I have some fantasy. I have this book, which maybe I'll just talk about this first because I'm holding it, and that is Recursion by Blake Crouch. And this I would call like a sci-fi thriller. Very similar in nature to Dark Matter. In like subject matter, totally different. It takes on a different kind of science, but I loved it. I am usually very much a character-driven reader, but this had a little bit of both. It had a very intriguing plot that kept me wanting to understand, which is the same thing that Dark Matter did, for me at least, because I really enjoy the science, is I wanted to understand. I knew I wasn't going to completely understand, and that's okay. There's a little bit of like suspending disbelief or just realizing that you don't quite get it, but that didn't take away from like me rooting for the characters, because I did love the characters. There's 2 main characters. There's a policeman named Barry and a scientist named Helena, because this is generally speaking about this syndrome called false memory syndrome, which is like this mysterious disease that people will get that will cause them to relive memories that are not their own, like that never happened in their life. So they're like these false memories from a different life, almost like if you would have chosen left instead of right, these would have been your memories, sort of idea. And so that is causing problems. Now, as the story progresses, I felt like it was really well paced. Like I said, I was constantly trying to figure out what's going on. I was trying to figure out how our 2 main characters were connected, because one of our characters, Barry, the policeman, was involved in like a case where someone had this false memory syndrome, and he was trying to help out. He was trying to figure out some things, and he found out some clues that were very concerning, and it started him down this path. And then we have Helena, who is a scientist who is driven by understanding memory, understanding how the brain works and forms memory, because her mom has Alzheimer's, and she wants to be able to help people store their memories in case they lose them so that they can replay them for themselves, sort of idea. So that's her goal. She gets wrapped up into some other things, and that brings in the suspense and the thriller aspect of it. Oh my gosh. By the time you get to the second half, because obviously I can't talk too much more than that, I loved the way this was set up. It's similar to Dark Matter, where he was like hopping around in that case in like different worlds and all this stuff, but this is more like hopping around time-wise. Hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler, but it's so good. It was so entertaining, and for me, this is my kind of book. I really enjoy sci-fi thrillers, so please give me any more that you might have, because I think they're really fun. And so I gave this a full 5-star. Like the whole thing I found intriguing. Yes, it was like bleak and depressing, and definitely had some like darkness to it in its messaging, but I just found it fascinating. And this was also our buddy read in my reading challenge, and so it was such a fun book to read with others. And so 5 stars. Recursion by Blake Crouch. Okay, Throne of Glass. I read Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. Now, I had been recommended, and a lot of people recommend, to read these at the same time. There's like a whole schedule, a tandem read schedule, because time-wise they happen at the same time, just in 2 different locations within this world. And this is the world of Selena, who is this renowned assassin who in the first book was captured and put into this like slave camp. And she was then rescued by the prince of this realm, who wanted her as his champion to compete in this tournament to become the king's champion. Now, that feels like so long ago by the time you get to these books. And there's so many people and characters that have been added. The world has expanded immensely. And now, would I recommend a tandem read? Hands down, yes. And like I said, it's happening with different characters at the same time frame. So basically what it feels like is it feels like a gigantic book where instead of you're switching between like 3 or 4 POVs, you're now switching between like 8 to 10 POVs. And as long as you can kind of keep track of everybody's stories, it's really intriguing because it all relates to each other. And I eat that up. That is something that I really enjoy, is trying to keep it all straight and trying to catch what is happening in one area and how it's relating to the other area and these characters, and I loved it. Okay, this one, Empire of Storms, mainly follows Selena, we'll call her that. And then this one mainly follows Kale, who was also present in the first couple books and who has been one of those characters that is like super annoying. When I read, what was it, Queen of Shadows, I was like, I don't like his character, but I feel like he redeemed himself a bit in this book. My favorite character in this book was Nesrin. I won't say more than that just because you don't quite know who that is early on, but her character I just related more to. I found her character arc and growth really interesting, and like I'm curious how that's going to proceed into the final book in that whole series. And the way this one ended, oh my gosh, like I'm ready and not ready to pick up that final book. And what's funny about this whole series, because I did end up giving both of these books 4.5 stars, 5 stars, like I rounded up to 5 stars. They are so good. There's definitely a writing style in here that sometimes just like annoys me, but I think it's just early Sarah J. Maas writing. I don't love Selena as much as I would like to. Usually I have to be rooting for our main character, but in this case there's enough side characters that just are so much fun, like the Witch Queen, like Dorian the Prince. There's just so many that make the story amazing, even though I don't love our main character. As I was reading this, I was like, oh, these just are so much better than the first ones. I'm sure I gave the first ones 3 stars. I looked back on Goodreads and I gave them 4 stars. I have since lowered that to 3 stars because how I feel about those first 2 books is very like mid, because the writing is very YA. Our main character is very like annoying and pompous, and it gets so much better. And I know that's such annoying advice when you're like, these books so worth the read. First 2 books, not really, but you have to read them to get to these books, and I'm imagining the last book is just going to rip my heart out. All right, so enough of that, but let me move on to probably, wow, no, these are all such good books, but this is the best historical fiction book I have read in a very long time. Probably because it has a pandemic, and let's just be honest, I love pandemic books. I find them so very fascinating. This one is about the bubonic plague. So this is called Eleanor of Evan by Elizabeth de Lauser, which this is her debut novel, you guys. This was outstanding. I ended up giving it, I think, a 4.5, rounded up to a 5, only because I felt like the end was a little rushed, but even that feels like very nitpicky in comparison to how I feel this book was written and how attached I was to the characters, how interested I was, how the stakes felt really high, which can happen in historical books. It's just not as common. So this is about our main character of Eleanor. Ella is usually what she was called. This is set in the 1300s. Yes, this is set in the 1300s in France during the Black Death, or the bubonic plague, Yersinia pestis to be precise if you have any science background. And Eleanor's like a midwife healer type person who honed her craft from her mother, although at this time the historical setting of this book has to do with the church, the Catholic Church really ruling this area. And so women, especially women who wanted more than just like family and babies, were looked upon with suspicion, especially those who sought to help people. And they were often labeled as witches, and it was just awful. And then on top of it, just her being a little bit different in the sense that she didn't want to just settle down. She wanted to become a doctor, which did not happen for women back then. Now, through a turn of events, she came in contact with the personal physician of the Pope at that time, which I did look up, which I love about historical fiction when it makes me look things up, because I had always thought the Pope had stayed in the Vatican and Rome and all these things, but during this time frame, he was in France. It was Pope Clement. He was in France. And in this story, our main character runs into his personal physician. There's a problem, and she's able to help and kind of establish ties with this physician. And even though she's a woman, he brings her on, and that all happens right before the plague hits. And honestly, the descriptions of the plague, it could gross some people out, and that could just be too much for some people. But for me, I found it really, really fascinating because my PhD is in microbiology. I think infectious disease and how it works and how it affects the body and how it's all the things. So interesting. And so being able to follow their experience as they walk through the plague victims. And you also have to know that like it takes out 1 in 3 people. So I'm like, who of her family members, who of her loved ones are going to be in danger? I love that. And then On top of that, so I really like this book. On top of that, like the historical aspect of like if the church, like the Christian church was in power, the Jewish population was often at odds with the church, and they were often blamed for things such as this. And they were historically. And in the author's note in the back, it talks more about that. And so, there's just so much in here that I was just fascinated. I was constantly turning the pages. I wanted to know what happens. There was so many stakes, and really it's a solid 5-star, even though I felt like the end was rushed. I just love this book. I'm still thinking about it. So if you haven't picked up any historical fiction, or if you like historical fiction, I highly recommend this. It was really good. Okay, so the next thing I picked up was kind of out of left field. I have been seeing Devney Perry all over, right? Shield of Sparrows, maybe? But I decided I wasn't gonna pick that up. I was going to pick up her romantic suspense that I have been wanting to read. I borrowed this book from my sister. It's called Indigo Ridge, and it's a romantic suspense set in Montana. Now, that matters. That matters to me because I grew up in Montana, and I love books that feature Montana. They always are like ranchers or farmers in some way, even though I did not grow up on a farm. It's definitely how authors see Montana, and you can tell that this author, Devney Perry, is from Montana. I think she is. Born and raised in Montana. And this is about our main character of Winslow, who moves to this small town to become the new chief of police. Her grandfather lives there. He's the mayor. It's very small town-esque. And there is this main family called the Edens. So this is the first book in the Edens series, which is, I think, a 6-book series. Now, when she gets into town, she accidentally, maybe not accidentally, has a one-night stand with the oldest Eden's son. Now, she didn't know that's who he was, and he didn't know that's who she was. And that causes a lot of strife and problems early on in the book. Now, there's also this mystery that is happening in this town where there is this string of suicides of young girls, and people have just wrote it off as suicides. And she just isn't so sure, and she starts poking and prodding, and people don't like that. And, you know, that is the suspense aspect of this, but it's very much a romance book. Now, I ended up giving this 4 stars, 3.75, 4 stars. I haven't quite landed on my rating. I think for me, what it comes down to is I love the setting. I absolutely love the setting. I love small towns. I love Montana settings, but I also love small towns. I love storylines that have to do with families, big families. I really enjoy that. I think the family aspects are always fun to read about. In this case, our main male character is named Griffin, and he is the sibling who is running the big ranch, basically. The other siblings have other jobs throughout the town, but he is in charge of the ranch. And now watching them kind of go back and forth with each other was really fun. Some of the things I didn't love, the amount of, not romance, smut in the book, but it's tasteful in the sense it's not super descriptive. That I do like. That was a big check for this. I just felt like it was always happening, and you're like, is that what this is going to be about? And it just felt a little too cheesy, a little too much. But then again, romance is not my main genre, and I feel like I'm always kind of complaining about that in book. But when I'm reading it, I'm really enjoying it. So that's why it's going to be a 4-star. Okay, last book. I picked this up on a whim for Mother's Day, and I really enjoyed it. Now, this is The Curse of Saints by Kate Dramas. I think this is her first, yes, this is her debut novel, and I really liked it. Now, it is an adult fantasy book that this first book very much reads YA. I feel like that's the biggest complaint of this book, is it does feel like a YA fantasy book, but then at the same time, I really like YA fantasy. And so for me, that's not a hardship. I feel like it's kind of refreshing that it's not so adult, that we can craft the story and the plot and the stakes in like kind of a slow on-ramp. So this is a story about spies, if you will, for the queen. And so the way this world is set up is there are these people called Vizias, I believe, who have God-given abilities. It says to keep dark magic from ever returning to the realm. And of course there's like this historical thing that happened where magic was kind of lost, and it was split up into these like 9 different disciplines, and a person can only have one of those things. They can either like be persuasive, or they can manipulate emotion, can manipulate fire or earth or whatever, right? Okay, now the queen surrounds herself by these spies who are Vizia, who have giftings, who she sends out to kind of manage things. And our main characters of Ava and Will are part of her inner circle. Like there's 3 people in her inner circle, and Aya is the spy master. She is going out to find information, and Will is more of the enforcer. Like, he's kind of the scary guy that they send to torture people or whatnot. Now, as the story goes on, some things are revealed about Aya that she didn't understand, that she didn't realize, and things get out of control. Will is helping her, although they have a lot of animosity towards each other. And bigger, broader picture, there's this war that is brewing from these people in the South who want to kind of resurrect all of these powers, if you will. Okay, generally speaking, that's what it's about. I loved Will. I liked Aya too, but Will was just super funny. And it was just his character that kind of kept it going for me. Very snarky and sarcastic, and he's constantly like getting a rise out of her, and she is constantly feeling like she hates the fact that he can get a rise out of her, right? And they're like competing, if you will, although they're on the same team. And it's really fun to watch kind of their relationship shift and grow, especially as you get through the book and they end up leaving the city for some other places. And you can see the bigger plot lines open up, because this is supposed to be a trilogy. Its third book, I think, is coming out later in the summer. So I thought this was a perfect time to actually pick this up. And then hopefully sometime soon I can pick up the second book. But I gave this, I think, 4.25, so more of a 4-star book. There were some aspects to maybe the plot that I didn't love, but the characters overshadowed it for me in enjoyment. So I really like it, and I flew through it. And I listened to the audiobook, which I don't actually recommend the audiobook. I think I enjoyed it more when I was reading it with my eyes. So those were the 6 books I read, and I really enjoyed them. Now, I am a TBR maker, and I like to read off of lists, but I have really been enjoying this kind of random mood reading thing that has been going on over the past couple months, and so I'm just embracing it. So let me know what you read in May, maybe top favorite. What are you liking as we go into summer, which I cannot believe. But if you can't think of necessarily anything to say, maybe just leave me, let's do a book stack emoji. I'm not feeling very creative. Just leave me an emoji to let me know you're here. But otherwise, you guys, like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to. And I will see you in the next book video. All right, guys, take care.